Go.
Streaming from South Africa to the world. This is the Stonks Go Moon podcast. What just happened? We break it down so you don't have to.
Welcome everyone to the Stonks Go Moon podcast. My guest today is Vijay Chetty, CEO of Eclipse. Welcome to the pod.
It's great to be here, Rocco.
Man, I love that accent of yours speaking, of recording and learning a bit about you and sort of your history and where you come from. But we're here today to talk about Ethereum and a bit about Eclipse, but most importantly Ethereum, because Ethereum was supposed to be sort of the blockchain, right? If you go years ago, it's sort of everything was about Ethereum. And I sort of feel like Ethereum got left behind. It's like everyone innovated and Ethereum was like, I don't know, infighting or arguing about stuff. But sort of to me, it feels like they've lost some ground. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's a complicated story, I think, for Ethereum, right? But I think it's a fair assessment in terms of recent times where, it's like if you get big, you get comfortable, and the pressure to innovate or to adapt lessens, right? And if you look at the Ethereum ecosystem, you had this like crazy explosion of the asset base in prior cycles, right? DeFi summer took place entirely on Ethereum and Uniswap, DYDX, like these great products at the time, and I was a part of those teams as well. Like, you see this like huge explosion in asset base and activity, but then in recent times, Solana has really taken the mantle with the higher potential for mainstream adoption. A lot of apps, particularly consumer apps, are choosing Solana as the marginal place to launch. And so I think it comes down to, the improving the developer experience, speaking to developers and users and meeting them where they're at. And so Ethereum has definitely, I think, been forced to reckon with this next phase and how they can continue to adapt.
Yeah, because I keep hearing people speak about when is Ethereum going above 4K? And as if that's the be all and in all of everything. So I feel sort of there's a disconnect between the token price and the blockchain itself. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. At the same time, though, I think people will refer to the token price as a justification for why Ethereum is struggling as well, right? Of course, if ETH was ripping to 10K, no one would be talking about
all
the struggles of Ethereum.
Yeah, all the struggles. Okay, let's get into Eclipse. What do you guys do for those that might not be familiar with your company?
Yeah, so Eclipse in a nutshell is a layer two that is combining the best of Solana with Ethereum. So Eclipse uses the Solana virtual machine for execution combined with the user and asset base of Ethereum. So you get the best of both worlds, the performance of Solana with the liquidity of Ethereum. So we often refer to Eclipse as Solana on Ethereum. And that's really the way to think about it is you're bringing Rust-based apps and these really high-performance apps, but you get to use Ethereum. You're building for Ethereum users, and those users get to use Ethereum assets like ETH and other ERC20s.
Yeah. What's the experience like from speaking to developers that are building with you guys, just in terms of using that? Because it's like, to me at least, it's a relatively new concept. It sounds cool. What's the experience been like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think if you look at crypto now, there's like these different pools of developers that are largely siloed based on like tribal ecosystems like Ethereum and Solana, but also based on familiarity with development languages and frameworks, right? So in Ethereum, there's Solidity, and then in Solana, there's Rust. And Rust is much more popular in Web 2 in kind of the traditional tech world, right?
Yeah.
So you've got this chance to really bridge into that. But at the same time, within crypto, the familiarity with Rust is lower more broadly, right? Of course, inside of Solana, all those devs know it well. But in that sense, I think there's really an opportunity to bring in a much larger crypto native developer audience to Rust, while also bringing in a lot of developers from Web 2 and traditional tech. So at Eclipse, we spend a lot of time trying to bridge
Yeah.
both those gaps and help to converge those audiences. But it's an interesting challenge and opportunity because there's less familiarity with it, and it's also a much more complex language. But it also therefore allows for much more interesting apps or experiences to be built on it as well.
As like what, for example, you say in more interesting apps, like what's possible that you can't do right now? Or like, let's say
So I
you talked about the tribalism, like one thing, one silo. Okay, cool. Let's forget about that. What's outside of the box?
Yeah, it's a good question. And
Mm,
so in terms of what's new or uniquely enabled, right? I think the biggest piece of that is performance, right? And apps that require very high levels of performance.
mm,
And for me, that was really a strong motivating idea in terms of building Eclipse and coming up with the idea of Eclipse, where if you look at Ethereum right now, the constraint has really been being able to build really scalable and low cost experiences or
mm,
tooling for developers to then build consumer experiences.
mm,
And therefore, you have this growth of layer twos. But even most of these layer twos have been constrained with limited transaction per second capabilities. And
mhm,
so being able to bring the tech of Solana, the Solana VM to Ethereum, you then unlock this much higher performance and throughput capability where you can now build apps like fully on-chain central limit order books or much more efficient trading
mhm.
experiences, right? And if you look at
Yeah.
Ethereum, most of these experiences have moved off-chain or they've moved to their own chains altogether because of those limitations, right? So I think that's one example.
Mhm.
Another example is a consumer app that is seeing where the app experience or the gameplay experience itself is creating thousands of transactions per second, right? And if you look at if you're trying to build an experience that really taps into what crypto enables, but also build a very interesting consumer app, you need to be able to write all those transactions on chain. And
Yes.
so the throughput of the Solana VM allows for these types of consumer apps to really run at scale as well.
Yeah. It's talking about
A
scale
good
and speed. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think a perfect example of this, just to highlight something in production,
Mm,
is the Moo Games that Eclipse recently ran. So the Moo Games was this ongoing kind of Squid Games type contest that we ran for users in partnership with developers. And there
mm,
were four games that users could play. And these were all games that really took advantage of the speed and the low cost that Eclipse offers. And we saw tremendous usage and interest in that. And the users who came on, there was a very high conversion rate because they all had this great experience playing these games without kind of having to pay a large amount in gas fees or without having to be rate limited or have a poor UX
yes.
because of speed limitations. So that's a good example of the type of kind of financialized consumer or kind of gamified consumer type experiences that Eclipse can really enable.
Yeah, so in crypto 2025, we're spending a lot of time talking about institutional adoption of DeFi as if institutional adoption is the be all and end all or the end goal, which I don't think it is. But do you think that this solution of yours enables institutional adoption or at least makes it easier or sort of because you spoke about scale and the speed and all those issues, does it enable does it get us to that point quicker?
Yeah, it's definitely a big part of that story, right? I
Mm,
think there's a large amount of capital with institutions, and they can help to drive network effects, right? So I think you can't ignore that audience, and I think we always need to keep them in mind and enable them to come on chain, and so that's a part of what we think about for sure, right? And I think
mhm,
providing high throughput and scale enables the ability to have high throughput trading platforms or capital markets platforms, which is often a big part of the story for these institutions.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's something we think a lot about, even in terms of my background. I originally came from that institutional world before I got into crypto.
Ooh, where?
So I used to be
Where?
at BlackRock, and so I think even for me, I think there's a lot of value to converging these two worlds, right? The
Yeah.
on-chain degen world with the institutional
Yeah.
world.
So you would know. You would know
Yeah,
because you had your, I always say BlackRock, it's like anyone who was in BlackRock, you had your hand in the puppet of the beast. You were like the puppeteer. You were like BlackRock. I mean, BlackRock makes the world go round. So you would, oh, that's very interesting. So you're coming from that into something else. So you know sort of how everything sort of fits together. That's really interesting.
yeah. At the same time, though, I think, it's like, why did we all kind of get into the space? I think for a
Mm,
lot of us, there's like these kind of philosophical or ideological like reasons around like things we believed in, right? Of like
mm.
expanding access or bringing on more users and really broadening that access. And so
Yes.
I think it's important as we think about institutional adoption to also really tap into what crypto and the blockchain can enable, which is these more open systems, right? And you
Yes.
may still need compliance in certain areas and combining that with the openness. But I think, it's like we're not trying to just replicate Wall Street on chain. We're trying to make it better and have a step function improvement so
Hmm.
that all of us and all the users out there can benefit from it as well, right? So I think that's important
But
too.
that's a tough job because then you sort of are relying on, yeah, but you're relying on political stakeholders as well, which is not always in your sort of, it's not a, you don't have control over that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a little bit of like a give and a take, right?
Yeah.
Where I think, in the tokenization world, like you have players that work exclusively with banks, but you also have players like Ondo who are kind of helping to really take an on-chain first approach and then
Hmm.
take that into the traditional world, right? So I think there's the process of getting there is definitely, messy and back and forth, but I think it's worth there's potentially a huge unlock and really that being a big part of what can allow crypto to go much more mainstream
Yes.
even.
What's your message if you want to leave people with a message today about the, and especially for the naysayers, I mean, blockchain has its fair amount of naysayers and people that don't believe in a decentralization or don't believe decentralization is necessary. What would be your message for them?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, especially now, right? Because we've come
Mm,
off this big meme coin cycle that kind of, in some ways, like over the last week, went up in flames with what happened with Libra and
uh,
the token launch there, right? And
I think it
uh,
derailed us a bit. I think
yeah,
honestly, to
yeah,
me, it derailed. It wasn't good. It wasn't good.
yeah. Yeah, it's I think with crypto, it's like everything, the pendulum always swings so far, right? Like
Yeah.
it like swings out here, and then it's like, okay, let's kind of come back to the center, right? And that's how you get these like cycles or trends, and so I think it's both the beauty and the challenge of crypto, right? But what I'd say is like I think all these things have value in moderation and in
Mm,
balance, right? It's sort of like a
mm,
life philosophy too, right? Just applied to the industry of like there is value to making it easy to launch tokens, and there is value to having even some of these assets that trade based on ideas, right? They're very interesting coordination mechanisms. Interesting things can happen. There's even some community takeover activity with Aptos that was interesting in the last week. So there's potential with all these things, but
mm.
there has to be good intentions and a willingness to build thoughtfully, ship real product, stand for something better, without also swinging like too far in the other direction and just replicating the traditional world on chain, right? So I
Yes.
think it's this continual pendulum swing, but with each iteration, I think that the industry grows stronger and more informed, and so I think that's the optimistic promise, right? Of like if we can elevate the right teams, the right players, and who have those good intentions, that's a big part of it as well, I think.
I love it. Vijay, thank you so much for joining me today. If the listeners want to go and connect with you and find out more about Eclipse, where can they do that?
Yeah, really enjoyed this conversation. If viewers are interested in connecting, they can follow Eclipse on Twitter at Eclipse FND as the
Okay.
Twitter handle. And my Twitter handle is at 0x liquidity. And they can also join the Eclipse Discord as well. Those are kind of the two best places. Yeah.
We'll put all the links in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me, and good luck to the future, for the future. And to all listeners, peace, love, and prosperity. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.
It was just a melody. When I write, it was just memory. Tell me your story, and I'll sell you a new one. What if, what is, only what I found was ever around? I am drunk with power, driven by hate, torn to pieces, cut from the fruits of imagination. At an hour of evening, then it's too late. And what became of all your dreams when your head became unsteady? Is it too top heavy? What's it to you? I try to write my plans, but I wrote an apology instead. I reached for a pen, but it was just sand. The hour is late with envy. The day catches the sun in epiphany. What's it to you? What's it to you? Like I knew. What's it to you? I never knew just who you are. Like I knew just what to do or just what to say. It is today, but time slips away. Time slips away, and you've gone away. Like I knew it was late with envy, but I wrote an apology instead. I reached for a pen, but it was just sand. The hour is late with envy. The day catches the sun in epiphany. What's it to you? What's it to you?